You were the one that told me yesterday you're no longer giving them the benefit of the doubt.
I know. Mace, how you feeling?
I was going to ask you, so when were the good times?
Well, I look at the day that they made the trade with Carolina as a good time. That was
the good day. I was on for the good day.
Yeah, it was a good day.
He was with us, remember that?
That's what I think about. Yeah. I think about that, about you being with us in that moment and the hope and the excitement. We got DJ Moore. Are you kidding me? We got DJ Moore, and we were really excited, and we thought the best was on its way, and we were all hopeful that this year would be better. If I would have told you, Mace, in September when we put you on, when I saw you at camp, when I was walking the halls with you at the Combine, that the Bears would have a 10-game losing streak this year, what would you have told me?
I would have been surprised, even if there were limits to the ceiling of what this team could accomplish, because Matt Eberflus, I do think, has had a limited ceiling, and I do think that the same went for Shane Waldron. I think that when you made that hire, you did it because he had been an offensive coordinator before. You were trying to get some level of certainty, even if it wasn't the most exciting choice. I figured that they would have been a mildly disappointing team, but not that the bottom would fall out. So I did not see it going this way, even if it was going to be a disappointing season.
With a lot of options to choose from, what was the most disappointing part of this season from a fan's perspective?
The play from Caleb Williams, I think it has to be. If you look at statistically what he did down to down, it's a bad rookie season. It's an objectively bad rookie season. You compare it to some of the lesser rookie seasons we've seen in the last decade or so statistically, and in a year where you had 3-4 rookie quarterbacks chosen, he was the worst rookie quarterback statistically of the guys chosen in the first round. That's absolutely disappointing. You can point to a lot of situational things and a lot of circumstantial things and structural things that led to that. But if you're a Bears fan and you're not a little bit upset with the way that went, I think you're probably lying to yourself a little bit.
All right, so dig deeper. How did that happen?
It's a whole mess of things. So Ryan Poles said it during his press conference earlier this week. If you look at the sacks, it's a rich text, the blame that you can assign for those sacks. He held onto the ball for way too long, way too often. But this is also a team that was up near the top of the league in the amount of unblocked pressures that they allowed. So it's a combination of offensive line injuries, bad protection plans, a quarterback that didn't know where his answers were and how to quickly get to them. So anytime you have an offense, again, where the bottom falls out of it, no one person is to blame. There's a lot of things at play here. And I do think with the right offensive coach, he showed enough flashes where you can talk yourself back into what this can look like. But there's a lot of different reasons that the end result looked like it did.
With the benefit of hindsight, I know this is kind of a question that you can easily answer yes to, but when I ask you, did they handle him wrong? Where I'm going here, Robert, is that at the beginning of the year, it felt like Shane Waldron and the entire offensive staff said, "Here's the entire playbook. If you struggle with a little bit of it as we go along, we'll pare it back." Instead of what the Washington Commanders did, and maybe with what the Denver Broncos did with Bo Nix, where they gave you a small offensive play approach, and then they built on it. Feels like we did it the other way. Do you agree with that?
I 100% agree with that. And I was saying that in real time. I'm not to toot my own horn, but I don't think I really needed the benefit of hindsight. Even in the moment where they were asking him to do so much at the line of scrimmage and they were doing so much tempo and making him, kind of orchestrate things at the line. And I just didn't understand the benefits of that for a guy walking into the NFL who had 37 career starts. Make things as easy as possible on him, and then you can build on it from there. You can talk yourself into the idea that giving him so much mentally will set him up better down the road because of what he had to shoulder early on. But I would rather make a guy comfortable and put him in positions to succeed rather than asking him to sink or swim, because there's always the chance that he'll sink. And I think there were too many instances of that this year.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the coaching search. We did this with a bunch of reporters locally yesterday. Who do you want, and who would you gamble on that the Bears end up picking?
I think I would want one of the offensive play calling head coaches. I've always said this. If I were in Ryan Poles' chair, I would pick an offensive head coach almost independent of what had happened in the history of my franchise. I think that having consistent offense in the NFL is the best way to have a consistent winner. And there are organizations that operate this way, by the way. So there are successful organizations I've talked to where they'll say, I would never have a defensive-minded head coach because I think the consistent offense is the most important thing you can do. And I would rather have somebody at the center of my organization, the center of my coaching staff, that is the product of that. Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, those sorts of guys. And so I would go that route no matter what, almost exclusively every single time if I were in the modern NFL. And if you look at the pool of candidates that fit that bill, I would take a chance on Ben Johnson. Like, there is just a chance that he is one of those transcendent offensive coaches. We have seen him do this for multiple years in Detroit. We've seen him do this with varying levels of talent, and we've seen him do this without one of the cyborg quarterbacks. And if you're able to do that over a longer period of time, even if there are some questions elsewhere about leadership skills and about command, I totally understand that. And I do think the floor with somebody like this is maybe a little bit lower than one of the CEO types we've seen do the job before. But I also think that too often the Bears have been seeking out a high floor and competency at that position instead of trying to hit the home run. I want to try to hit the home run. And maybe you'll swing and miss, but I think in this cycle, that's Ben Johnson.
All right. And so knowing that about who you want, is that also who you're predicting that's who they're going to get?
I don't know if that's who they'll get because he may have a more compelling offer elsewhere. You know, if you go to Las Vegas now and you have Tom Brady there and they just fired the GM and you say, all right, you can work with Tom and you can reshape this organization in your image. Or Jacksonville says, hey, you know what? Trent's here right now. We want you. We want you and your vision for this. Trevor Lawrence, even if, you know, maybe there have been some frustrations with him as the quarterback in Jacksonville, he's better today than any of the quarterbacks that the other teams have to offer. This is a chance for you to not have to dig your way out of a hole offensively. So there's a chance that he just gets a more compelling offer elsewhere. But if that happens, I still think I would look at the pool of offensive coaches and probably trend that direction.
Give us some other names that you think would be likely choices or who they should be looking at, if not Ben Johnson.
I'm surprised that Liam Cohen is not on their list because I just think that if you look at what has succeeded in the NFL, and I've said this since this process has started, hiring a head coach is a bet. It's a bet where you're just trying to put your chips down in the right spot. And there's a chance you could lose. There's a chance that you could bet on the wrong set of traits. But you're playing a percentages game. And that's part of the reason I would go offense. And if you look at the percentages of which head coaches have worked out and where you find those guys in the last 5, 6, 7 years in the NFL, those young offensive coaches from the Sean McVay tree, I know there's jokes about if you met Sean McVay, you're going to get a head coaching job. Well, those work. Those are the guys that have worked. Look at LaFleur. Look at Shanahan. Look at what Kevin O'Connell has done. And Liam Cohen fits that bill. So I think that he's just somebody based on the background and the archetype of what he is, I would be interested in talking to him.
Well, how would you evaluate the job, that Ryan Poles has done to this point over the course of the last 3 years? And are you surprised, Robert, that he is still their general manager?
I'm not surprised. I think that it has been a mixed bag, to say the least. From a roster talent perspective, I think that he has done a good job of churning the roster back to a decent place. You know, there have been swings and misses, no doubt. And I think from a roster talent and a roster construction perspective, my biggest issue with Ryan has always been he seems to get an idea in his head and then he's unwavering about seeing out that idea. I think that the Chase Claypool trade is a perfect example of that. Embrace uncertainty. Embrace the fact that if this doesn't happen, it's okay. Like, the moves you don't make can sometimes be the best moves. And I think too often he's fallen into that trap. The problem is being a general manager in the NFL is not just about roster talent. It's also about the other big picture decisions that you've made. And I think that bringing Matt Eberflus back this season was a mistake. I thought that in real time, and I think that that's borne out to be very true. No one was going to be upset if you fired Matt Eberflus coming into this year and said, I want to start fresh with a new quarterback and a new offense to set this guy up for success in the best way possible. They did do that, and that has put this organization in a very familiar place.
If they don't get Ben Johnson, do you believe that he will be able to take the risk of a Liam Cohen or a Joe Brady, or do you think because of his status in the building at that time that he may go with something that would be perceived to be a little bit less risky?
I wouldn't be surprised by that, and I think that that's part of the problem in that the way that teams have hired head coaches around the league for the last few years. The offensive side of things is pretty picked over. Like we're giving young, mildly unproven offensive coaches head coaching opportunities because there just aren't that many of them left. They've all been hired. Like look at Dave Canellis after 1 year as the Bucs offensive coordinator, getting that job in Carolina. And then the other offensive coach that got a job in last year's cycle was Brian Callahan, who didn't even call plays in Cincinnati. So I think there is a chance. And this is all relative. So if you do miss out on Ben Johnson, maybe your best option to immediate competency is somebody like a Mike Vrabel. But even there, I mean, Todd Monken, think back to 2013 when they decided to hire Mark Trestman instead of Bruce Arians. If I were one of the decision makers with this organization, I would be thinking about that as I talk to somebody like Todd Monken, who is 58 and a little bit deeper in his career. But does that necessarily make him not desirable as a candidate after what he's done with that offense in Baltimore? So I would just continue looking at that side of the ball, especially because you are currently in the process of having to develop a young quarterback.
So are you saying that Monken could be this year's Arians?
I think there are similarities. I think there are similarities from a broad strokes perspective. And, I don't know Todd well enough personality-wise to understand how he would be at the front of the building, how he would be putting together a staff. There's tons of uncertainty there. And again, I don't know these guys enough and haven't talked to enough people to be able to say, yeah, like I'm sure this is going to go well. But if you look at their backgrounds, back to back, Bruce was like 60 when he got that job.
Yeah.
And so Todd being 58, I do think that there are some similarities. And I think that what Todd has done as a play caller at every single level, and this is not just at Georgia and with the Ravens, Todd was a really good play caller in Tampa when he was there in 2017 and 2018. So I would at least give him a look from what he's done as an offensive architect, because I think that there's a lot to like there.
Robert Mays joining us, Waddle and Silvy on ESPN 1000. Back to Ben Johnson. We've tried to get this answer from other people, too. And I've gotten, mixed reviews. What do you know about his personality? What do you know about him at the front of the room? Have you met him, and what do your league sources tell you about his personality?
I have met him, and I think that I think as a communicator, there is a lot to like about Ben Johnson's background. In talking to Jared Goff this summer and just discussing how Jared has really turned his career around and reached the point that he's reached, he references his relationship with Ben and the dialogue he has with Ben as one of the reasons that he's been able to be unlocked. He told me that they just talk every single day. Every single day there's some sort of back and forth about why are we doing this? Why is this play constructed this way? Where are my outlets here? So I think that the ability to really instill a certain confidence and ownership in your quarterback, that's really, really important. That dialogue between a play caller and a quarterback, to me, is one of the tent poles of a successful organization in 2024. And I think that what Ben Johnson has done with Jared Goff, that's very real. Whether you can handle some of the other aspects of the job, whether it's discipline, accountability at a big picture level, that's always going to be a question for these guys who aren't overwhelming personalities and have only been limited to, this is how I draw up ball plays, and when your scope is limited to your side of the ball. So I think that's the bigger question. But I think too often we think about culture and we think about what we want out of NFL coaches, and we think of these guys who are rousing speech givers or these guys who are like tough guy football people. And I was reading Jordan Renon's story on ESPN.com today about the Giants, and there were so many players anonymously that they talked to for that story about this year's Giants team. And all they kept saying is, all we want is somebody that's honest with us. Just be honest about your expectations, about where we're falling short. And I think clarity and being able to talk to players on their level, even if it's not necessarily in the most exciting, dynamic way, there's a lot of value to that. And I think that seeking out a coach who can do that is a worthwhile pursuit.
It may be skipping a few steps, but any idea what a Ben Johnson staff would look like, Robert? We've talked about maybe he could bring Hank Fraley with him and elevate him to offensive coordinator, knows what a good offensive line looks, could help out a Bears team that is in desperate need of an upgrade there. What would his staff look like if you had to project?
It's a good question. I've asked other people that, and I haven't really gotten a strong answer. And I don't know if he would bring Hank with him, but I think that is definitely a good idea, because I think too often, teams have not looked at offensive line coaches, especially for play calling head coaches, as potential answers. I look at what the Packers have done with Adam Stenavich there, and being able to retain that guy because you have a play caller already, I actually think that's a smart way to build a staff. And, Ben has been in a couple different places. He was in Miami for a long time through multiple different staffs. He was in Detroit under multiple different staffs. He's been in a lot of different offensive systems. And so I think that's also something that's really enticing. These guys who they've only been in one place, they've only seen how to run things one way. I think that there can be a rigidity to the way that they think about stuff that is bad, because when you have to change personnel, when you have to tweak things for different types of players, they can struggle to do it. And I think that because Ben has such a varied background, I would have fewer questions about that than I might have with somebody like a Matt Nagy, for instance.
Mays, if I told you that the Bears went to the podium and then announced that Pete Carroll is their next head coach, what would you say?
I would say I understand it, but I would say it's just par for the course for this franchise. It's more of the same. We're seeking some misguided semblance of stability rather than the best person for the job right now based on how the modern NFL works. And I think that would be a mistake.
There's so much talk about changing the culture that I think that's why they may lean in that direction. But I'm with you. If it's Liam Cohen, it's Joe Brady. My choice has always been Ben Johnson. You got to get this offense right with what you've got invested on that side of the football, whether it's Caleb Williams or Rome Odunze or giving DJ money or, all that you've added on that side of the football. They got to get it right. Let me ask you this question as well, and it's something that it's kind of silly, and I wouldn't participate in it. But if you could redraft first overall, do you believe that Ryan Poles would still go with Caleb Williams? And what would you do?
I don't know if he would. I think Jaden Daniels has been good enough that you'd have to ask yourself some questions about that. And I think that Drake May has also been really good. I also don't know how useful of an exercise that is.
Yeah.
I think that Caleb Williams showed enough as a rookie for you to talk yourself into him being a successful NFL quarterback. This is an important distinction for me. When you look at guys who take a ton of sacks, that typically there's a quarterback element to that. And I think that you'd be denying it. You'd be telling yourself a story if you said there wasn't. It's like quarterbacks are responsible for their own sack totals in some regard. But some guys who get sacked a lot, it's because they have a real obliviousness in the pocket. They don't have a sense for that space and how to navigate that space. I actually think he does. If you look at his ability to climb the pocket, to feel pressure, that exists. Too often, I think that he got bogged down mentally because he was trying to make the right play all the time and when he was going through progressions. So I do think that if you can communicate the offense to him, if you can be like, listen, here, you're one, you're two, you're taken off. You're one, you're two, you're taken off. I don't think there is anything about who he is and his DNA as a player that's going to not allow him to kind of step past the sack issues. And because of that, I don't think there's anything inherently broken about who he is to the point that you can already say taking him with the number one overall pick was a mistake.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've just said from the start that this being the floor is not a bad floor to be at. Do you know what I mean?
I agree with that. I agree with that to an extent. I think the flashes have shown you that the floor is put pretty high from a talent perspective. But when we look at some of the statistical markers from this season, a lot of people are going to point at touchdown interception ratio, and they're going to say, look at that. That's not that bad for a rookie. Well, part of the reason the interception total was so bad is because he got sacked 70 times. And if you think about the value on those plays, that's as bad as some of the interceptions that he could be throwing. I wish the interception total would have been 3 times as high as it was this season, because it would have shown more conviction in some of the decisions that he was making. So I think there are some elements of this where they're better than it could have been, but I think if you look at advanced numbers associated with the efficiency of his dropbacks, it's bad. It's as bad as most of the really, really ugly rookie seasons that we've seen over the last 10 years or so.
Mays, great stuff as always. How are you and the family doing? I know, recently you guys had to put your dog down. We've gone through a lot of this recently at the radio station. Jeff Meller just had to do it this week. We had one of our salespeople do it. It is life-changing, is it not?
It's really bad. You know, I mean, it's just me and my wife. You know, we got married about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, and we don't have kids yet. And so that dog has been with us for the majority of our relationship. And, you know, I've never lived in this house without her. And she was a very central part of who we were in this stage of our lives. And to have that be over and to be missing her, it's a real huge change. And I think that, you know, it feels a little bit lonely and a little bit quiet, and we've had to deal with that. But we're really lucky to have each other, and we're really lucky to have a really amazing support system, and we'll be okay. But we miss her. I think that's really at the center of it, and I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, anybody who's had a dog understands that it is more than a pet. Like this is a friend, this is a family member, and it is so hard. All the best to you and your wife. Thanks, Mays.
Thanks,
we appreciate
Robert.
you.
Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, Robert Mays.